Without infrastructure and energy, a continent that will be integrated in terms of trade and logistics will not be a reality.
If you want to transform your economy from primary dependence on raw material to manufactures, you need energy. Whether you are talking about trade, whether you are talking about industrialization, those things will not happen if we don't have good infrastructure. So the case for infrastructure and energy development has been made.
Africa is at a crossroads, with some of the fastest growing economies in the world and the youngest demographics on the planet. The growing infrastructure demand presents a critical challenge for Africa if it intends to compete in the global and regional trade markets that depend on speedy and reliable delivery.
The quality of Africa's infrastructure has a direct impact for trade, the cost of trade. Take, for instance, the transport situation of the continent. Inadequate transport infrastructure raises transport costs, transaction costs, which makes Africans' products not competitive.
Infrastructure, as we know, is so important because it creates jobs, it creates opportunities for young people on the continent, and it also connects countries. It builds bridges, it connects people, it connects communities.
One of the integration objectives is to enlarge Africa's market, and you cannot talk about a large market without physically connected country. Talk also about energy. You cannot have competitive products in countries where you don't have stable, secure electricity. In many countries where you have people using generators. All of these things impact on the competitiveness of Africa's product because of the high cost. The cost of energy is high, the cost of transport is high, the cost of ICT in the continent is high. We cannot compete with other continents with these kinds of high costs.
The rapid and concerted rollout of groundbreaking initiatives across the continent to improve road and rail networks and access to electricity through renewable resources are examples that speak to the heart of the African Union's Agenda 2063. The Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa is a continental framework of Agenda 2063 that aims to address the infrastructure deficits that have hampered Africa's competitiveness in the world market. PIDA aims to deliver on its vision for Africa by focusing on 4 key areas: water, transport, information and communication technology, and energy. In relation to energy, the goal is to develop efficient, reliable, affordable, and environmentally friendly energy networks through development of clean power generation and transmission, high-capacity oil and gas pipelines, and development of renewable energy resources. Furthermore, PIDA will promote and enhance integrated water resource management through development of transboundary waterways and strengthening institutional cooperation for efficient management of shared water resources. PIDA also aims to build a transportation service that will promote movement of people, goods and services through development of a modern African regional transport infrastructure network of roads, railways, ports and air transport services. Moreover, PIDA aims to ensure Africans have access to reliable and affordable ICT through rollout of affordable broadband, increasing access and security of internet services, and promotion of intra-African e-commerce. With over 400 plus projects across the continent, the African Union's Development Agency, NEPAD, is responsible for the implementation of the Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa.
So our role is really to coordinate and facilitate with project owners through the regional economic communities so that these projects can be accelerated and construction can commence. We've done a lot on the generation capacity, but now we're really thinking through as to how to integrate the entire continent in terms of looking at the existing power pools. There are 5 power pools, but the thinking now is to design a system that would allow all these 5 power pools to be integrated. That has a number of implications, which means that if you look at the cost of energy, it's as low as 4 kilowatt cents an hour in one particular country and as high as 72 cents per kilowatt hour in another country. But it gives you an idea of the disparity and what will Africa become if we were to have one unified integrated transmission power pool, wherein we will be able to really calculate the actual cost of electricity.
We have member states in Africa which are energy poor. Energy poverty in Africa is rampant compared to the situation in other parts of the world. It's much easier to buy power, to import power, than to generate it locally. Because again, energy generation depends on the energy source. If you don't have waterfalls, if you don't have natural resources that generate energy, you have no choice but to import the energy. And that is the reason we have energy power pools, all over Africa, to try and make energy a good that can be exported and imported. If I produce more than I need, then I should be able to sell the extra to my neighbor. The uptake of renewable energy generation is moving faster than elsewhere in the world. And the good thing is Africa is endowed with renewable energy sources, probably much more than you can find in another place in the world.
The actual cost of energy is the single most important element dictating our future energy output and consumption, with hydropower on the continent being one of the most cost-effective energy resources.
One of the biggest advantages of developing hydropower is that the cost of production per kilowatt is much lower than the cost of all the other renewable energy sources. Solar, wind power, biogas, mention them. Hydropower so far is the lowest. The other advantage mainly is that most of the hydropower we're talking about power that we generate from running water. So the running water, unless you have affected it environmentally and the rivers run dry, is always replenished by itself. So that's one of the biggest advantages over the other sources of power.
Take the Grand Inga hydropower project. With an earmarked location 225 kilometers from Kinshasa and 60 kilometers upstream from the mouth of the Congo into the Atlantic Ocean, the Grand Inga Dam scheme is intended to have a generation capacity of a massive 40,000 megawatts. The transformation for the potential of the Congo region and beyond are immense.
The Grand Inga Dam has a huge potential to really bring down the cost of energy on the African continent. If you also juxtapose the Batoka Gorge, these 2 projects alone will drastically reduce the cost of energy because of where it's situated and its potential to really transform the countries around where it's situated, and not to mention the quantities of kilowatt energy that will be added into the grid. So the Grand Inga as an energy project, it's a very significant project because, as you can recall, it's one of the 12 projects of Agenda 2063. So it's one of those priority projects juxtaposed with the continental free trade area, the single Africa air transport market. So it is a priority for the African continent, and we hope it will be realized very soon.
While Africa does have ample energy resources, more than half of the population of our continent still have no access to electricity. And even amongst those who do, blackouts are common. Meeting our future energy demands has the potential to transform our households and spur development.
Imagine quantum amounts of energy. Just imagine that. Having access to 24 hours of affordable and available electricity can change the game, because very quickly we'll be talking about light manufacturing. very quickly in terms of SMMEs that are involved in the agriculture value chain will be able to move into value addition. We talk about canneries and tanneries and preserving agricultural produce for accessing the market in another, another area or another town or another city.
Energy is very important for the development of the continent. There are 600 million Africans who still need access to electricity. So for that, we are focusing on renewable energy particularly, given the huge potential we're having across the continent. So India is a mega project that's being developed, and we are working with the studies and the different policies and the legal framework. But we also have several other initiatives across the continent. We do have the geothermal energy that we are financing, and we are supporting countries of East Africa. We are working for the remote areas, because we don't want the remote areas or the small villages to be left behind, so the mini grids and the off-grid solutions, but also the transmission of electricity across border. And for the transmission to cross border, there are two aspects: the physical aspect, and that's through Nepal, but also the harmonization of policies and regulations, which we are doing at the African Union for the electricity and for the energy sector, which is very important. As soon as you cross border, you have to make sure that all the standards, policies, tarifications are harmonized.
Africa is already not short of infrastructure progress, with a major restructuring of the rail and road corridors already underway.
Railway initiatives are on. Our advocacy is for expansion and more modernization of the existing railways, and also a railway line is a future transport choice for Africa.
Addis Ababa to Djibouti, the railway is functional. In Kenya, you have Mombasa to Nairobi, which will be extended later on to Rwanda and Uganda and so on. That is happening. In other parts of the continent, you have the North-South corridor, which is linking the ports of Southern Africa to Eastern African countries. And in fact, we are also beginning to see the political will.
As well as providing energy and infrastructure needs, the added effect of hard infrastructure, such as the introduction of the Pan-African high-speed rail network across the continent, will enhance regional integration and trade facilitation. The integrated high-speed train network is one of the flagship projects of the African Union and aims to connect all African capitals and commercial centres through an African high-speed train network, thereby facilitating the movement of goods, services, people, as well as increasing connectivity, reducing transport costs, and relieving congestion of current and future systems.
African cities are gradually changing into mega cities. The city of Kinshasa is now more than 15 million. In 5 years, it will probably be 20 million or more. Environmental concerns, coupled with the safety issues, will put railways on the forefront of all other transport modes. So, inevitably, I think the future of Africa, the connectedness of Africa, the efficiency and the effectiveness of the continental free trade area will have demands that can only be met by a high-speed train.
Well, there are a number of implications. I mean, first of all, it transforms the African continent holistically. The fact that we're going to have a high-speed rail network connecting cities on the African continent, seamlessly connecting cities, really cutting down travel time, going across borders. That has a number of implications. Secondly, it will also bring down the cost of travel in terms of air travel, because automatically you'll have an alternative to air travel. And I think thirdly, because it has a developmental impact, there's a socio-economic dynamic to that. You will be able to move cargo and goods very quickly. You will be able to move people very quickly. You'll be able to really make sure that African capitals that are connected can really integrate and really do a lot more than they're doing now.
In order to sustain projects of this magnitude, financial resources and long-term commitments from member states are integral for success. The African Union are working with member states and partners to secure financial commitments for long-term projects.
To develop infrastructure on the continent, huge investments are required. Huge investments, huge money to make sure that infrastructure is constructed. So the public sector alone is not able to finance this. And obviously you need partners. So talking about investment and investment opportunities and willingness to invest is very important to get the private sector on board. And together with the African Union Commission, NEPAD, and with our support, a continental business network was established with a membership of 30 private companies. And this continental business network obviously looks into the funding needs and promotes these projects and looking for investors for these projects.
Most African governments spend on infrastructure. In fact, 62%, between 62 to 70% of Africa's infrastructure is publicly funded. So it's a strain, and that's why the NEPAD agency has been really focusing on bringing private sector on board. There are certain countries that have commercial banks that are also considering putting investments into vehicles that will require long-term patient capital. And I think the PIDA program, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, with its set of projects, if well packaged and properly structured, which we are involved in doing, we should be able to also attract these various types of investments, from the institutional investors to commercial banks putting money into it, and of course private capital will always put money into these projects, and of course the development finance institutions.
We have infrastructure as an important pillar for our engagement in Ethiopia, and this also of course resonates very well with the Agenda 2063, the PIDA, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. We also know the Continental Free Trade Area, the NEPAD, IPPF. These are all initiatives that the bank is involved. But let me come to the road infrastructure, and I will focus on the cross-border. We have a big program. Our portfolio value in the road infrastructure currently is about in the order of $500 million. A significant project among these, which is a cross-border project, is the Mombasa-Nairobi-Addis Road Corridor Interconnectivity Project. We find these road corridor developments very, very important because we know that we would do this to connect high potential agriculture areas, improve using this to improve the productivity of farmers, connect farmers to input markets, but also to output markets, and also create opportunity for backward and forward linkages that would actually spur development in this country. On the energy sector, a key cross-border project in this operation is the Ethiopia-Kenya Electricity Highway. This project, we are constructing 1,000 kilometers long of high voltage transmission lines, which is also matched by converter stations, one on the Ethiopian side and one on the Kenyan side. This will form the basis for power purchase agreements between these countries, and therefore give them the opportunity to trade power as they see it fit.
While adequate supply of infrastructure and energy services on the continent are an essential ingredient to boost economic productivity, the benefits of infrastructure and related services are equally able to cascade to peace and security issues.
There's a strong nexus between peace, security, development, and infrastructure. For instance, if you take the map of Africa and you highlight the areas where the mega transboundary infrastructure projects should be implemented or needs to be implemented on the Program for Infrastructure Development. So that's one map, and then you superimpose a second map on top of that map, and you identify where the natural resources are deposited across the continent. You will quickly find that there's a strong link between the natural resource deposits or the extractives and the mega transboundary projects. They're pretty much in the same area. Then you'll take a third map and you superimpose it on top of the two maps that I've mentioned. And you'll find out in terms of peace and security, the hotspots are also pretty much located in these areas. Now, imagine those hotspots that I've just mentioned. Imagine if these transboundary infrastructure projects are actualized. What will that mean? It will mean that there will be very little incentive for groups of people to disturb the peace, because jobs would have been created, services would have been online, infant industries would have matured into manufacturing, value addition, and export. Trade would have been enhanced, logistics would have become seamless. So there is, in our minds, although we haven't concluded yet, we are beginning to see a strong link between development, peace, security, and infrastructure provision.
As the continent grows, so will its needs for energy consumption and the rebuilding of infrastructure. The African Union are at the forefront of incremental shifts that are now moving the continent forwards towards a prosperous future and the Africa we want.
Africa, given the good economic performance for the last decade or so, the middle income is increasing. People with disposable income, people who want to spend, people who want good services. As we move out of poverty, as we improve our own lives, we need better services, we need better goods.
If we industrialize, if we make sure that infrastructure projects are being actualized, it's becoming a reality, electricity provision is happening, people have available, affordable, and accessible energy, and roads are seamlessly constructed, there's internet connectivity, there's pipe and running water. I think very quickly we should be able to really nurture those small and medium-sized enterprises. More young Africans can build and write apps. We should be able to transform our economies, and it's happening. I mean, a number of African economies have tremendously changed. You see it, you feel it, and I think it's all positive. It's really all positive.